Welcome, friends. I'm Dr. Malia Jones. I'm the editor-in-chief here at Dear Pandemic, and we're here. We're joined today by my fellow nerdy girl, Dr. Ashley Ritter. We're going to answer questions from our readers. And Dr. Ritter this is her first time joining us on the live, so I'm really excited to welcome her. She's a nurse practitioner, and she has a PhD in nursing research. She specializes in aging and nursing home populations. Thanks for joining us this morning, Dr. Ritter. How are you?
I'm thrilled to be here this morning with our Dear Pandemic community, a refreshing start to the weekend.
Yeah, we are delighted to have you. So you have some awesome news this week. You got vaccinated.
It was a good week in that respect. I did get my vaccine on Wednesday. I work in long-term care with individuals that are really high risk of complications from COVID infection. And so we had a campaign at our facility, and long-term care, we partner with CVS. So a CVS team came to our facility and we were able to vaccinate over 200 people through the course of the day. So our residents in the nursing facility got vaccinated, our staff, and I'm so impressed with the partnership between CVS and our facility in rolling out something that is brand new and really has a lot of steps that need to take place to do it safely and effectively. And I was really, really grateful to everyone that put the time and effort into doing that.
That is awesome. Congratulations. It's really exciting. I bet you feel so much relief.
I'm so happy to have my first dose. It gives me a little bit more confidence in being able to help my residents as best as possible and protecting them. So looking forward to that second dose, and really the gift of protection to that community means so much. We had a good amount of loss, and we really want to be able to move past that.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. So we have questions from our readers today. So I just want to remind everybody that we don't take questions cold. If you have a question, you should go to our website and submit it in the question box, which is right at the bottom of our website under submit a question. It's dearpandemic.org. And while you're there, you can go ahead and search for some words in your question, because we have answered so many questions over these last, gosh, what is it? It's going on 10 months, almost 10 months that we've been doing this.
I think we've answered more than 700 questions.
Yeah. So there might be an answer waiting for you. Today, we're going to take mostly questions about vaccines. In fact, I think it ended up entirely questions about vaccines. So we've got a couple of questions picked out, and I get to ask the first one. So if you're ready for this, we have a question from Kathy from Hong Kong, Diane from Battle Creek, Michigan, and many others submitted in our question box this question. Does a person who has already had COVID need to be vaccinated? And there's a follow-up to this question. Should I wait 3 months after my COVID diagnosis before I get vaccinated? CDC says that you may wait 3 months after a COVID diagnosis, but doesn't say that you should or shouldn't. So what do you think?
Well, I'll answer the first question. Absolutely, yes. If you have had COVID, you should receive the COVID-19 vaccine. And really the reason for that is a combination of when you have infection, we don't know how much immunity you develop, and we don't know how long that lasts. So to give everybody the same protection, it's recommended that everyone does get the COVID-19 vaccine, even if you've had the infection before. Now, if you think about the second question, can I wait 90 days or should I wait 90 days to get my vaccination? That again gets to how much immunity and how long you have it. So what I would say to that is you can wait 90 days, but you do not have to wait 90 days based off the evidence and the recommendations that we have right now. And again, this is, we're thinking about how the immune system functions and, the way that we produce immunity. Current evidence about COVID infection suggests that reinfection is unlikely, very unlikely, within 90 days of infection. And so receiving a vaccine within those 90 days is likely to provide some additional protection, but you do have some natural immunity, or at least most have some natural immunity at that, but before that 90-day mark. Now, the reasoning for waiting 90 days, also you could think about it from like a population level. So we have a limited supply of vaccination at this moment. And so is it better to give vaccination to somebody who's never had COVID in the last 90 days to extend the number of people who have some immunity? And so there are some places that you may see recommendations to not give to somebody that has had infection within 90 days. And that is more of a population sort of look at this.
Yeah,
now,
that's looking to stretch the amount of coverage that we can get out of the vaccines we have.
Absolutely. So there have been the people that do need to wait 90 days. I think this is important, is anyone who's received convalescent plasma treatment. The recommendation is that you wait the 90 days from the treatment before you receive the vaccine. And that one is based on, you've had your own antibodies, you've had antibodies from the plasma that you received, then stimulating your immune system with a vaccination. You now have 3 reasons to have increased antibodies. And so we had a recent post by Michelle Kinder about the antibody, ADE.
Antibody dependent enhancement.
Yes. Forget the name every time. So there is not evidence that the vaccine would stimulate your body to have a worse infection because of the antibodies. But if you have had the treatment with convalescent plasma, you do want to wait the 90 days. So I would say go get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've had COVID-19, then yes, you are recommended to receive the vaccine. And if you have had COVID-19 in the last 90 days, then you might want to wait just to let other people go first and extend the amount of coverage that we can get. And then the other thing you didn't mention that we have heard some reports of people who've recently recovered from COVID-19 having those expected side effects from the first dose of vaccine. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I'd love to talk about that a little bit. So, when you have a vaccine, but when you get particularly the COVID vaccine, there's a range and continuum of symptoms from I feel nothing to feeling symptoms of your immune system revving that can include chills, body aches, fever, headache, soreness in the arm. And really there's a continuum of symptoms. So somebody that has had recent COVID infection has some antibodies in their system. And when they receive that first dose, it can act like that boost that the second dose of the vaccine might look like. And so you could have symptoms from the vaccine that do dissipate fairly quickly after the vaccine, but give you that feeling of not feeling well. So, you may, somebody that has had COVID recently might have more of an immune revving system response to that first dose of vaccine. And so you can expect a range of symptoms. Generally, they resolve within, about 24 hours, but you might not feel great.
Yeah. Okay, and we're going to drop a link from the CDC about this recommendation for people who've had COVID-19 to go ahead and get vaccinated for those reasons.
Well, now I have a question for you, Malia. Kai from Minneapolis asks, based on the existing info regarding the ability to harbor virus after being vaccinated, won't the vaccination campaign basically create millions of potential super spreaders? People won't wear masks or socially distance. They haven't been doing that now, and they certainly won't do that after receiving the vaccination. How might we handle this situation?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's a complicated one because there are a lot of topics that are embedded here. So get ready for a complicated answer. So first of all, I want to talk about what is the information we have so far about the vaccine preventing infection. So what we know so far about the 2 vaccines that are currently available, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, they do an excellent job of protecting us against having symptoms of COVID-19, of getting very sick and dying of COVID-19. But we don't know whether being vaccinated protects against a more mild infection that is asymptomatic. I actually talked about this last week with Amanda on the live show. If you want to go back and watch last week's episode, it's at minute 17:22. So we don't know that yet. It might take quite a while to figure out whether or not the vaccines protect us against an asymptomatic infection. As an aside, I can't predict the future, as we have seen very clearly over over the last year. But just based on how well the vaccines perform, I expect that we will find they do produce neutralizing immunity, at least in most people. We don't know that for sure, and it could be up to a year before we do, but that's my hypothesis, is that they probably do really suppress infection in most people, just based on, I mean, they prevented nearly all cases of severe COVID-19 in the trials. So this has led Kai and many others to ask this question: if the vaccines maybe turn people into asymptomatic carriers, won't this just lead to a whole lot of asymptomatic carriers walking around and actually make the pandemic worse? So let's review some terms. First, there are important differences between super spreading, asymptomatic spreading, and pre-symptomatic spreading in terms of how good we are at giving other people COVID-19, right? That's transmissibility. So if you want a review on what is pre-symptomatic versus asymptomatic, we're going to drop a link from one of our own posts here that covers those two terms. But in a nutshell, asymptomatic is someone who gets infected, but they never show any symptoms. And pre-symptomatic is someone who gets infected, but they haven't yet manifested symptoms. So there's this window after you've been exposed, but before you become symptomatic, and that's pre-symptomatic. So this week, there was a new study from CDC that showed that a lot of COVID-19 spread is actually from people who are either pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic. And I'm going to quote from the JAMA article on the results here. They found that persons with infection who never develop symptoms may account for approximately 24% of all transmission. In this base case, 59% of all transmission came from asymptomatic transmission, which was comprised of 35% from pre-symptomatic individuals and 24% from people who never develop symptoms. So this is suggesting, this is a model, and it suggests that 24% of all COVID-19 transmission circulating in the world today comes from people who never develop symptoms. Okay, so yes, this is a problem. This is the reason that we need people who have been vaccinated to continue to wear masks and otherwise protect the people around them until we get some more information about the vaccine's effectiveness on preventing asymptomatic infection. But no, these people won't become super spreaders. A super spreader is someone who is extremely good at being contagious and infecting lots and lots of other people. They have very high viral shedding, or they have some kind of special ability to like projectile their viral material for really long distances. Everything we've seen so far suggests that the asymptomatic people who truly never become symptomatic, are not as contagious as people who go on to get symptoms. And I have not yet read any instance of an asymptomatic person being a super spreader. So in a nutshell, getting a whole lot more people to be asymptomatic would still put a huge dent in transmission. And by that, I mean, it would take the R value down a lot. It would probably take the R value down below 1, which means that we would not see an increase in cases. We would see decay in the number of cases, and that would be enough. Another way to put it would be that I'll take 24% of transmission versus 100% of all transmission. I mean, that would be enough to get the pandemic under control. So we do want people who've been vaccinated to keep wearing a mask and protecting the people around them until we find out the answer to this question. But, even with some people who refuse to do that, it'll still help. It will. So I think it's good news. The link that I'm going to drop here is from a Popular Science article that I thought actually did a really nice job of summarizing, like, why don't we know this yet? When will we know it? Why is it important? And also, what is asymptomatic transmission?
I love that answer, Malia. I think we sort of need to frame this as getting things under control, and individuals who have been vaccinated will bring down the number of people that can then get infected. And that's really what it's about right now, slowing things down and spreading that net of protection to more people.
Yeah. I just as a follow-up, I have have a number of friends who have been vaccinated or will get vaccinated sometime this month, which is so exciting. And they've been asking me like, okay, so what do I do now? What are reasonable ways for me to behave after I've been vaccinated? And we have kind of tackled this on Dear Pandemic, and I'm sure we'll do more posts about it. But the answer is that unfortunately, in the short term, there's really not a lot of changes that someone who has been vaccinated can make. But as we get into that, as we get more and more people covered and we start to get control over the pandemic, we'll start seeing the level of cases in the community go down. And at that point, we will start being able to get back to normal. So it's going to be, that's why it's going to be gradual, right? Because we don't have the answer to this question, but we will start to see cases, transmission rates will start going down. And so at some point you'll see, many fewer cases in your community. And at that point, I think we can take off our masks and, I don't know, have a party. Breathe all over each other again. Okay, so my next question is for you. We've got a question from Marcy from Chicagoland. Marcy asks, I work in a school and in my state, teachers are getting vaccinated soon, but so many of my coworkers are afraid to get the vaccine. What can I tell them to convince them that the vaccine is safe? What can I do to support local vaccine efforts?
This is such an important question. I think many of us are experiencing individuals in our own networks that are feeling really nervous about getting the vaccine. And I think I would frame it a little bit differently to what can I do to convince them, to what can I do to really listen to what people are saying and the reasons that they're nervous about getting the vaccine. So, there are many reasons that somebody would be nervous to get a vaccine. Is it a knowledge that they just don't have the information they need to make a decision? Are there valid concerns such as distrust in the health system historically, or an underlying medical condition that makes their situation a bit different? Are there logistical issues that they just don't know how to get the vaccine? So you really need to listen and be open-minded to why somebody might have concerns about getting the vaccine. And you want to keep that door open for conversation. You want to focus on conversations where there's a window of opportunity to change somebody's, to give them the tools to make the decision that's best for them. I really try to focus away from changing somebody's mind versus giving somebody the tools to make a decision that acts in their best interests. So there are going to be people that are downright not going to take this vaccine. And if we focus our energy there, we miss the opportunity to have conversations with people that really might change their mind based off a conversation or a relationship or a bit more information or time. And as individuals, I don't want anyone to underestimate how impactful a conversation or what you can do as an individual can be to change somebody else's mind. And so having a toolkit of resources available that you feel comfortable sharing is so important in being able to share that information when those opportunities become available to talk to somebody about their hesitancy. So you want to elevate good information, and to have that good information, you need to know the sources that you feel most comfortable sharing and be ready to tweet them, Facebook, send them in a text message, or sit next to somebody and show them a link to information that's helpful. And then third, you want to model the good behavior. Get your vaccine, be very visible in that, be honest. I did have some chills and fatigue after my vaccine. I told my friends and family about it, and I woke up the next morning fine. So, I think being really transparent with people and modeling the behavior you wish to see can be really powerful. And last, but really, really, really not least, is this is local. This distribution is going to happen locally. And, being sort of the steward to that information in your area can be incredibly helpful. So, the vaccine is going to roll out very much at the state level. So the state will get an allocation of vaccination, and each state is making decisions on how they're going to distribute that vaccine. So go to your state website and find out what the plan is in your state. you know, right or wrong, that's the way that the distribution will happen in your neck of the woods. You could also look at your county Department of Health website to see if there will be particular clinics or the vaccination distribution timeline and groupings. So you could be that source of local information. You could look at regional infection trends. So I recently looked at an NPR tracker about how the hospitals around me are doing. And what was really motivating is some of the hospitals around me are really hitting surge capacity. And so being able to tell that piece of information, it is a little bit more meaningful than looking at a national dashboard when it's, you know, my neck of the woods where I have colleagues that work in this environment and family members who have received care. And there's also opportunities to volunteer in many of these state and county level websites. So if you have skills in administering vaccines, or you're willing to help administratively with campaigns or public health, you know, outreach campaigns, that's a really good place to sign up. And so get local, stay engaged, and be that sort of beacon of good information that you lift to your peers.
Outstanding. Those are great tips. I want to talk a little bit about one of the vaccine myths that we have heard, because it's related to, especially in the teacher population, and also to some extent in the nursing population. People who work in those professions do tend to be women of reproductive age. And one of the things that we're hearing a lot is this myth about possible reproductive harm or effects on future ability to conceive. And so I have a little bit of a rant about this. I mean, we've taken a ton of questions about it. We've actually addressed it once in a post already. And I just want to emphasize that this is a myth. There is not a recommendation that someone who's been recently vaccinated wait 3 months before trying to conceive. That information comes from the phase 3 drug trial participants, and it's actually, it's very common. It's almost boilerplate language for a phase 3 drug trial. It is not the recommendation for the general public that there is any reason to wait to try to conceive after you've received the vaccine. And in addition, you know, the reason there's not such a recommendation is that if we look at the way these vaccines work biologically, there's just not a biologically plausible pathway for there to be an effect on someone's future fertility. And this applies to both female and male future fertility. So what does that mean, that there's not a biologically plausible pathway? You know, if I said to you, Ashley, well, we don't know if this vaccine might cause us to grow an extra pinky toe at some point in the future. You might say, well, no, we don't know that, but why on earth would we expect it to? There's just not a reason why. I mean, there's no biologically plausible way that could happen, right? And so, so I want to be frank about it. This story about there being infertility or possible infertility for either men or women as a result of these mRNA vaccines is a scare tactic. And we've seen it deployed in a very intentional way by the anti-vaccine advocacy groups. And I just want to call it what it is. It's a fabrication meant to play on our emotions. So in a nutshell, you know, if the objection you're hearing is that the mRNA vaccines could have a future impact on either female or male reproduction, there is no reason to think that that is true. That's a myth. It's a fabrication.
Agreed.
So that's my rant on that particular one. I mean, I think it's really important what you said about listening and hearing what the specific concerns are. And, you know, I think that people want to make these decisions in a way that's informed, and it's, and I hate to see these very targeted attempts to undermine the vaccine by playing on our emotions.
Agreed. And again, we are in this race against time to get as many people vaccinated as possible, so this virus has fewer opportunities to replicate. The more time and people we give for this vaccine or for this virus to change, the less effective the, you know, sort of the science that we have is at fighting it. So And this sort of leads into our next question, Malia. Tara from Wisconsin asks, do the vaccines we have so far work on the new viral strains, in the two strains, specifically the UK variant and the South Africa variant?
Yeah, so great news came out about this. Last week I had to say we don't know, and this week I say yes. The vaccines there was a news release yesterday that showed that in laboratory testing, the Pfizer vaccine was just as effective on a genetically modified virus that has the specific mutation of most concern. It's a mutation that's shared by the South African variant and the UK variant. And they tested in a test tube, they tested blood from people who had recently received the vaccine against this genetically modified virus, and it was just as effective. So that's awesome news. The vaccine, in all likelihood, is just as effective against these strains. Now, the vaccine the virus that they tested the vaccine against was genetically modified to have just one of several mutations that we've seen. It's still possible, but it seems unlikely that a combination of these mutations or a different mutation than the one that they tested could have an effect on vaccine effectiveness, but it doesn't seem very likely. So that's great news.
Major win this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Big win. All right, well, that is all we have time for today. So thanks for joining us for our weekly live Q&A. If you have a question, you can go to our website and search for an answer to it. We've answered over 700 questions so far, and we will answer many more as this unfolds. You can also submit your question. It's on our question box at dearpandemic.org. And I will be here at the same time next week, 9:30 a.m. Central Time, and I'm going to be joined by another one of our contributors. I actually don't know who. I didn't look it up in advance, so it'll be a surprise.
Allison.
It's Allison. Oh, wonderful. That's great. So we'll probably talk more about vaccines next week then. All right. So until then, Ashley, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Stay sane, stay safe.
Bye.